I'm Charles Goyette for AntiwarRadio.com.
The attention of a lot of the cable news channels, much of the world, much of the debate in among the talking heads, and of course on talk radio as well, is about the visit to the United States, the forthcoming visit to the United States of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who is coming to New York to address the United Nations General Assembly, who has talked about visiting Ground Zero, who will be speaking at Columbia University. Here is a quick report from CNN.
On the streets of New York, one person suggested the Iranian president should instead go to hell. However, in an interview with CBS's 60 Minutes, the president said he will not fight the fact that the New York City Police Department has rejected his application to visit Ground Zero. Richard Roth, CNN, United Nations.
All right, so let me welcome to our program this morning by telephone from Washington, D.C., Michael Ledeen. Michael Ledeen is the author of a new book called The Iranian Time Bomb. He's with the American Enterprise Institute. He writes for National Review Online as well. Mr. Ledeen, thank you for being on our show.
Good morning.
The last time we spoke, you may not remember, but I do. It was shortly after 9/11. You had a rather insightful piece, I thought, in the Wall Street Journal, in which you revealed the extent to which the sympathies of the Iranian people were with the United States. You described the candlelight vigils on behalf of America in the parks in Iran, and I wonder if that sympathy for America persists in Iran today.
Oh, yes, big time. But if I remember right, I was urging our government to support the Iranian people against that regime, which is the world's biggest supporter of terrorism, and we still haven't done it.
What does this mean when somebody says to support the Iranian people? Does that mean to suggest that if the United States were to launch a preemptive attack on Iran, that people like yourself believe that the Iranian people will rally to us rather than to their own central authorities?
Well, nobody knows. I mean, that's the kind of hypothetical question on which experts claim to know things, but they can't. I think it all depends on the context and how it's prepared. In any case, I'm against bombing Iran. I am in favor of bringing down the regime. And I think the best way to bring down that regime is exactly the same way we did it in the case of the Soviet Union, which was another nuclear power after all. And we did it by supporting the dissidents and the opponents of the regime, and in the end it became an irresistible force. And that was a country in which you had maybe 5 or 10% of the people openly hostile to the regime, whereas in Iran you've got upwards of 70%. So it ought to be much easier.
So it sounds, though, when I hear you talk like this, that you are very much reenacting the Bush administration's policy with respect to Iraq and the invasion of Iraq that you supported.
Well, I thought that was a mistake. I thought that we should have done Iran first because it was obvious, I thought, and it turned out to be true, that if we went into Iraq without dealing first with Iran, that the Iranians, the Syrians, and the Saudis would come after us inside Iraq and try to replicate in Iraq what they had done to us in Lebanon in the 1980s, and that's exactly what happened. And I also thought that the operation in Iraq was excessively military and insufficiently political. I thought there were better ways to do it.
Yeah, there were better ways to do it. Well, all of these things are hypotheticals, and I'm not sure that the American people are really interested in the risks that are being proposed. I mean, are you suggesting that we continue to fund covert operations against Iran?
I don't believe there are any covert operations against Iran, sir.
Well,
I really don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. Seymour Hersh in the New Yorker's got a pretty good track record on these things, and he tells us that there are.
Seymour Hersh has a near zero track record.
He's got a pretty good track record.
No, Seymour Hersh has been saying for more than a year that an American attack against Iran is imminent, and nothing has happened, and nothing is happening.
Yeah, thanks to the revelations by people like Seymour Hersh, more people are beginning to turn their attention on the administration, and it checks their more aggressive impulses.
You know, that's the kind of argument that once you assume that something is true, no amount of evidence will dissuade you from continuing to believe it. So he predicts that there's going to be an attack, then there is no attack, and he says, aha, you see, I stopped it. It's like the man on his front lawn waving an umbrella around his hand, keeping the saber-toothed tigers away.
That's pretty good, except for the fact that people now know the propensities of this administration to attack on the basis of feeble or non-existent evidence. And furthermore, they remember or have heard the representations by President Bush that he won't leave office without doing something with respect to Iran.
He's never said it. No one has ever said any such thing. Only so-called experts say that. What President Bush has said is that we are pursuing a diplomatic course with regard to Iran. Our troops in Iraq are forbidden to cross the border, even in hot pursuit against terrorists who have come across from Iran into Iraq. And there is simply no evidence of the sort that you're referring to. There is no statement by President Bush saying he will not leave office unless he's dealt with this.
Well, I mean, he didn't go in front of a press conference like yesterday or on the lawn of the White House to say it, but it's certainly been widely reported from intimates in the White House.
No, it's been reported by people who have no evidence for it.
Yeah.
There is no evidence for it. Yeah. There's no evidence of American action. There's no evidence of American intentions. And there's no statement by a single American official. It's just made up. And I'm sorry to hear that you believe it.
Yeah, it's all made up, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
You might be persuasive, except that we have precedent. I mean, we all remember President Bush being besieged by reporters as he entered the helicopters on the White House lawn. Mr. President, are we going to war with Iraq? He goes, I haven't made up my mind yet. When indeed we know from good sources that he already had.
Well, what he'd done in Iraq, simply because one thing happens in one place with regard to a specific incident does not mean that it's happening in another place in a totally different context. We have been negotiating with Iran in the company of various European countries now for 4 years. Everybody in this administration has said that we're looking for a negotiated solution to the Iranian nuclear question. I do not believe that the Iranian nuclear question is the central question. I think the central issue is the Iranian regime and the fact that it's been operating against us now for nearly 30 years. I am totally opposed to military action against Iran, as you know, having read my book. I am in favor of political solutions supporting Iranian people exactly the same way we supported things like the Solidarity Trade Union in Poland and Soviet dissidents in Russia. So I am not one of those who's advocating the kind of action that Seymour Hersh is inventing, because I'm convinced it's an invention. Yeah. And if it did happen, I would condemn it. So please don't put me into that crowd.
All right.
But so far as I know, and I'm here in Washington, and I talk to as many people as any other journalist or analyst in this town, and I do not see any hint or any evidence that we are preparing a military attack against Iran, which I repeat, I would condemn if it happens.
Oh, do you believe that a military attack has not been designed in the bowels of the Pentagon somewhere?
Oh, I'm sure we have military plans for a military attack against Bermuda.
No, I don't think we have any plans for a military attack against Bermuda.
Oh, I'm sure that's what the Pentagon's plan to do. They do contingency planning.
No, come on. Don't trivialize the discussion.
The serious issue is whether we have any intention of doing this, and so far as I can tell, we do not. And I'll just point out to you that there are a lot of other countries around the world who are acting as if our only options are to try to negotiate this problem away, or to attack, which I think are false alternatives. The French government recently said that we're gonna be faced with a choice of Iran with the bomb or bombing Iran. I think those are false alternatives. I think there are better ways of doing this.
What specifically are those ways? I mean, if you could implement specific policies, what do you have in mind?
I would do exactly what we did in the case of the Soviet Union. I would support the dissidents.
How?
I would by broadcasting to them, above all, by giving them information about what's going on inside their country. I would work with international trade union organizations to build a strike fund for Iranian workers who haven't been paid for up to, and in some cases over a year, so that if they chose to go on strike and demand their rights, they could be on strike without starving to death and without having their children go hungry. I would get them communications gear so that they could talk to one another around the country, things like cell phones, laptops, servers, phone cards, things of that nature. Just replicate what we did in the case of the Soviet Union. The United States traditionally has supported democratic movements in tyrannical countries.